And now I'd like to introduce Jorja Whyte with New Era. New Era is the leading voice for young people in Colorado politics and one of the most effective youth civic engagement organizations in the country. Jorja is the Aurora and Denver regional organizer for New Era Colorado and began her role in February of this year. She graduated from Colorado State University with bachelor degrees in psychology and sociology last May, and her background spans across youth community organizing, local and state policy, and basic needs work, including housing and food security advocacy. She's going to share details on their voter registration project and offer concrete ways you can motivate young people to register, show up, and get involved in the political process. Georgia, take it away.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. And thank you all for being here and giving me some time to speak with you all and chat about how to engage young people um, in our current civic project. So I'm going to talk a little bit about New Era Colorado, who we are, what we do. I'll specifically talk about our voter registration program, some of our community organizing efforts, and then we'll chat a little bit about some key messaging that we like to use when we're registering young people to vote or encouraging them to get registered to vote. And then we'll open it up to a Q&A so that y'all can ask your questions. And I want to give us lots of time for that. So I'll just quickly go over some of these things and chat with y'all a little bit about who we are and what we do. So, New Era Colorado, like Tiffany mentioned, is one of the leading youth power organizations in the country, actually. We operate across the state of Colorado. We use a regional community organizing model, and so we have organizers and folks that are working in each of our regions across Colorado. We have a Northern Colorado organizer, a Boulder and Longmont organizer, a Southern Colorado organizer, and then I am the Denver and Aurora organizer. And like Tiffany said, I just started in February, but as a young person who just graduated and has spent some time in DC, in the fall I interned with the U.S. Senate and came back and just was really craving some space for community organizing, especially in the city where I grew up and that I love so much and has given me so much. Yeah, I love New Era so much. We are like an organization that puts our money where their mouth is, that like really cares about young people. We have registered over 250,000 young people since our organization has started in 2006. We have touched over 1 million young people in this state, whether that's through engaging them through testimony at the Colorado State Legislature, getting them registered to vote, getting them connected to local advocacy opportunities and volunteer opportunities with us. And then also just connecting young people to each other to make sure that they have a space to be with values aligned, young people who share their interests, who share their passion for advocacy. And yeah, a few things about New Era Colorado. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit. I think this bodes really well for young people because, like Tiffany shared in the amazing presentation that she gave, young people are disillusioned with the entire political system as a whole. Most of young voters in Colorado are not affiliated. They're nonpartisan voters who get both ballots in the mail in the primaries. They feel disillusioned with both sides of the political spectrum and have seen candidates on both sides of the political spectrum fail us many times. And so um, I think that that really helps us as an organization engaging young people. We also define young people as anybody from the ages of 18 to 36. And we do some pre-registration with high schoolers. So I would say we also engage kind of that 15 to 18-year-old range. But we have a big range that we is kind of like our target demographic. And those are folks that we're trying to get registered, turn out to the polls, engage in advocacy opportunities across their local communities, and feel connected and feel like they have a stake in the political process. And New Era just actually celebrated our 20th anniversary. So we started in 2006, and we were started by some students at CU Boulder who were part of their student government at the time. Two of the founding members of New Era Colorado are actually Jonah Goose and Brittany Pedersen, who are currently serving in the U.S. House of Representatives for the state of Colorado. And they were in student government at CU Boulder, felt like they really had some stake as representatives for their university. And when they graduated, they felt that seat at the political table kind of went away. And so New Era was kind of started with the aim and intention of creating and reestablishing that seat at the table for young people. We know that young people have been at the heart of every social movement for transformational change across the history of our nation. And I think that young people are so powerful that our institutions, our systems of government, and systems of oppression have spent millions of dollars messaging and making young people feel like they don't have a seat at the table, like they don't have a voice in this process, like their vote doesn't count. And I think that that is intentional. It's disenfranchisement. We know that young people are one of the most disenfranchised populations in terms of voting, and especially young people of color. And so our aim as an organization is to combat that, to make sure that people and young people are getting connected with the opportunities to register, to turn out to the polls, to have educated information about who and what they're voting for, and to be able to engage outside of our traditional systems with our community organizing work and local campaigns that are tailored by the young people that are part of our base. Um, and so, yeah, I think I touched on that. We have a regional organizing model, like I said, so we are across the entire state. We typically do local and state work. We have a separate entity than our 501(c)(3), which does our nonpartisan nonprofit work that is able to do political activity. And so we also endorse youth champions each year for the primaries and the general election. And those are candidates that we know are going to fight for young people, fight for affordable housing, economic justice, working class rights, and fight for our youth agenda. And a little bit about our youth agenda. New Era works off of a progressive youth agenda. We're nonpartisan, but we spent a couple of years in 2020 going across the state and doing a listening tour, talking to young folks from every single community, every region in Colorado about what matters most to them and what they care about. And the issues that came up for young people consistently are housing affordability, economic justice, environmental justice, voting and democracy. And I think there's one more that I'm missing. And reproductive justice, reproductive justice. And so we're constantly also, as an organization that aims to serve young people, reassessing what young people care about in policy right now. And oftentimes, young people care more about issues than they care about candidates. They care more about the underlying values and affordability than they care about where a candidate is affiliating party wise. And so I think that's also something interesting about young people. And in terms of our voter registration, well, I'll talk a little bit about some of the other community organizing things that we do before I jump into voter registration. But part of what we do is create spaces for young people to be connected and to plan local advocacy campaigns and give them a stake in like a leadership position in that process. So many times like young people are just not taken seriously when they try and engage in the political system. And I think that like getting young people registered to vote, getting young people engaged in our system and in civic engagement in general starts with taking them seriously and not writing them off and actually listening to their ideas and not just listening and being like, like, oh, that's a great idea. Maybe we'll do that someday. But like, let's actually put you in a leadership position and make sure that we can get this to be a tangible action plan. Let's, like Tiffany said in that presentation, we want to be collaborators. We don't want to be recruited to and like told what to do. We want to be and have a part in the a stake in the process of deciding what we're doing in the first place. And young people have passion. We want to be engaged. We're so passionate. We're so values aligned across our state. There's so many progressive young people that care about justice and equity and care about our current state of politics. And I think so many people just don't know where to start. And not everybody wants to register to vote, and not all young people are eligible to vote. And so that's why we also do a big emphasis on community organizing. And that's part of what makes voter registration with young people easier is that like if they're not ready to register to vote or they have a lot of distrust in the system at the moment and they decide that that's not something they want to engage in, we have opportunities that we can point them to that are outside of just voting. And there's so many other ways to make your voice heard outside of just voting. And that also allows us to give opportunities to folks who are ineligible due to citizenship or age, opportunities to participate in our civic process. And then one way that we kind of create those spaces is through community-based nights. So across our regions, we have 2 community-based nights per month. They are often in community spaces that are kind of institutions across our community. So at Aurora, we do them at our Denver office. We do them at a local community space called Oyen Kafitisin. And we give young people time to connect, time to experience joy, because we know that like joy is a prerequisite to our advocacy and justice work, and they're interconnected. And so if we're not creating space for that, young people aren't going to be drawn to our work. And so that's kind of one piece of our community organizing work. And our community-based nights are also where we take the time to do professional development trainings for young people. That's also something that like so many young people are seeking. And if we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, like that is an easy way to engage young people. And they get to choose like what we're talking about, what matters most to them, what we're creating action plans around, how to create effective campaigns as a young person, and how to mobilize the rest of the young people in their communities as leaders. And so that's a little bit about that kind of bucket of work. So I'll kind of jump into our voter registration process and some key messages that we like to share with young people when we're registering them to vote. Um, Once again, I think it really helps that we're nonpartisan. We really don't give any guidance or advice to young people about who they should choose for their political party. And I think that that is helpful. I think that when young people think that you have an underlying intention for trying to engage them, they are automatically a little bit more hesitant and suspicious of what they're filling out or what they're doing and why. And so we don't give any information about who they should choose for their political affiliation. We always tell them that it's not a permanent choice, that they can change it 30 seconds online. And most young, like I said, most young people are unaffiliated in our state. And so most young people are getting both ballots in the mail. We know that a lot of them are voting on the Democratic ballot in the primaries. But that is, I think, like a trend that we're seeing among young people is they are hesitant to affiliate themselves with a political party. And that's also why when our other entity, Young People for All People, does endorsements, we make sure to make it clear that we're actually not endorsing based on political affiliation. We're endorsing based on how well they align with our youth agenda and with the issues that young people care about. Um, and then another thing that we like I think we'll start like meet young people where they're at. And I mean this both literally and metaphorically. I mean this like, let's meet young people at college campuses, at music venues, at third spaces that young people are going to. At community colleges, at technical colleges, which are often overlooked when we're thinking about like where young people are at. And so I think it starts there, like meeting young people where they are already at. Summer festivals, concerts, music venues are always amazing. Um, Places to register folks to vote. We just registered a ton of people, a ton of young voters at the Pride Festival that happened in Denver. Um, and so um, that is one. And then metaphorically, I mean, like meet young people where they're at in terms of like what they're feeling about the voting system and our political system as a whole. I think it's okay to tell young people that like it's okay to be disillusioned by the political system. And if they say, I don't want to vote, I think approaching that with curiosity is one of the most important steps to like moving people along the spectrum. And rather than saying like it's a right, it's a privilege, it's something that we all need to be doing, like it's our duty, that messaging doesn't resonate with young people. What resonates with young people is like you can make tangible change by using your voice. This is how you can take back some autonomy in the political process. You don't have to vote, but you have the ballot, you're registered to vote, and you have that choice in front of you. I think that a lot of young people have are convinced that their vote doesn't count. And so another one of the key messages that we like to give to folks is tangible examples of where the youth vote counts. An example for me, because I work in the Aurora and Denver region, is that in Aurora, New Era was one of the only progressive organizations to endorse candidates, progressive candidates for our city council. And what ended up happening is we educated young voters. We talked to young voters about why they should turn out for these candidates, and they won. And a lot of our city council elections are literally won or lost by a couple hundred votes, and that is the youth vote. And so if young people are registered to vote and if they're actually voting, like they have like the real potential to be the deciders of who represents them. And I think that like a lot of young people want those tangible examples. They want to say like if they want to they're going to ask why. Why does it matter? Show me where it matters. Show me evidence. And I think that that is really important to provide for young people when we're talking about why it's important for them to vote and register to vote. Um, and then I think the other thing that we love to say, like one of our other key messages, is that the ballot is not a test. A lot of times it feels like it is. It has really complicated, fancy language on it. It feels like if you mark the wrong thing or you choose the wrong policy or you mark yes when you're supposed to mark no, that there will be these grand impacts. And that's just not the case. It's not a multiple choice test, and you don't have to fill out every single question on the ballot. A lot of young people don't want to vote because they don't want to vote for a political official. Um, Once again, I think it speaks to that distrust that a lot of young people feel around both parties and politicians and leaders on both sides of the political spectrum. And this experience with folks saying that they're going to lead and fight for working class people, and then they end up selling out to corporations and PAC money. And so the other thing that we love to tell young people is that they don't even have to vote for political candidates if they don't want to. They can skip to the end of their general election ballot and just vote on ballot measures that have real tangible impacts on where money is being moved around in their communities, what new community spaces are being created, whether or not their communities have free lunches at their schools. And these are things that you can see the tangible impacts of within a couple of years. And so, and obviously we want young people to vote for people that they like for our leaders that represent us. And if the way that we get them to start voting is just by voting on ballot measures, like that is better than nothing. And so I think that's also like we can take stepping stones. And I also think like once again bringing emphasizing our community organizing work and doing work outside of the traditional systems is so important because sometimes that is the stepping stone for young people deciding if they want to register or not, or deciding if they want to participate in the political system in this way. They might have to go out there and do some advocacy work, go do some canvassing, go talk to some people, go talk to their legislators before they decide, wait, like, yes, this is really, really important. And providing that experience is so important for our young people. And that is how we create leaders who will be able to carry this torch forward. in the future. So, um, that is kind of my key messages to y'all. But I want to open it up for a Q&A. And if y'all have any questions, happy to answer them. Happy to elaborate on anything that I chatted about. Yeah.
So you motivate people to go out and vote, right? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. We register folks to vote, but we also turn them out to the polls. And we just finished up our primary work, which was very exhausting, but also super, super exciting.
Um,
And we got to see the
and
impact of that.
Now I'm a little older and it's a little harder to connect with younger people. Um, in totality, I get what you're saying. Is there a simple, quick way somebody comes up to my table at an event? We go out to where they are. Kind of what's a good hook to get connected with somebody?
That's a great question. And I feel like my answer is going to be kind of surface level, but it is actually so effective. Fun stickers will bring young people to your table immediately, and food. Um, and I think that those are like two of the things that we consistently use. I also think that like when we can do fun hooks, I don't know why, but young people really love swear words. So if you feel like that's something that you're comfortable with. Like all literally every single button and sticker that we have, it's like our big catchphrase is like vote fucker. Right now we're working on some economic justice stuff with taxes and it's like tax the rich fucker. And literally young people like come to our table and eat our stickers. And that's how we start our conversation about whether or not they're registered to vote, whether or not like they want to sign our graduated income tax initiative, things like that. And then I think also like the other thing is like I think being authentic. I don't know. I think that like people automatically can like young people can tell whether or not you're putting on an act to try and resonate with them or not. And so I think that like young people are drawn to authenticity. And so like when you can just really speak like unfiltered with them, I think that that's something that really like draws young people to be engaged and like be like, yeah, this is somebody who actually gets it. Um,
One question from the chat, but I do want to ask a follow-up because in my experience, there's been a lot of um, skepticism looking at somebody who's older. So, you talked about kind of the how do you get them hooked? How do you overcome somebody who's predisposed to not listen to what you're going to say?
I think honestly, the answer for me is to like have more young people with you. I think that like one of the ways that you can like recruit young people is through like university systems, through work with youth power organizations like New Era. So if y'all ever want to collaborate on something, definitely reach out to me. Um, I think that there's always going to be young people who maybe feel like older folks are not going to get it. And maybe I think that might just be a truth that we're going to have to live with and a barrier that we are going to have to overcome by one, like being authentic, being open to the young people who are open to older folks and having those conversations with older folks, but then also like having opportunities for young people to be tabling with you concurrently, that you can point them to, that if you can notice like there's disengagement, you can say like, hey, come over here and talk to this person. And so I think also the answer is like putting young people in the positions that like you are when you're tabling and engaging and meeting young people where they're at on college campuses. Um, and yeah, and I think that one way to like, I don't know, overcome that initial barrier of like, okay, how do we get young people to come table with us? I think that young people are always looking for professional development opportunities, even when they're unpaid. I think that paid opportunities are so important for our young people, but I know that that's not always an opportunity. So any kind of like fellowship programs, internships, any kind of like professional development experience that you can give to young people while also like helping them like have them be in collaboration with you for these efforts of like youth engagement, are really important. So I hope that is helpful.
That is extremely helpful. The first question I have is at the beginning, what motivates you and what did your childhood teach you that you bring to adulthood?
That's such a great question. I think like what motivates me to be engaged and like what draws me to like this organizing position and this I think work as a whole, which I think like a lot of my passion started for that in high school. First of all, I got the opportunity in high school to do a program called Youth in Government. And that like opened so many doors for me. And I don't think that I would be here without that like opportunity today. And so it's so important for us to give like civic engagement opportunities to young people who are in middle school and high school. But I think that like one thing that I think has really informed me is growing up in Aurora. I am somebody who has seen and like experienced housing and food insecurity firsthand, and seen like what that looks like for my peers as well. And I think that like as young people, there's so much potential in our city. We're constantly like overlooked. And I think that that like knowledge of our like interconnectedness and potential is like what drives me to know that there is a better future for us out there. I think that like at the core of all of the work that I do is this knowledge that like our liberation as a whole is interconnected, and like when one of us is suffering, we all are. And so I think that that is like a big thing that drives me, and also being able to have lived experience in a community that has been used as a political pawn in like national news, in federal races, in the presidential campaign. I think like really drives me to seek something better for my community that I care so much about. And I think also like this is I think that that like that's something that I like has carried me through my entire professional experience through undergrad. That's why I started doing basic needs work. I served as the director of basic needs in our student government. And a lot of people don't know this, but our young people in higher education are in a basic needs crisis. Like 1 in 2, 50% are housing insecure, and 1 in 3, 33% are food insecure. And so I think also being exposed to those realities, having them reaffirmed to me consistently, and knowing that with like if we are unified through like collective liberation and this like seeking for justice and love and community and joy, like we can and will create a better future. And as young people, we like literally cannot afford to sit this one out. Like we will not be able to be homeowners. We will not be able to afford like basic needs if we don't participate right now. And so I think that's also another big thing for me.
I love listening to you. Like hearing all of this is really cool for me. Um, I'm not going to get into the higher education system and how badly it's broken because it's just as broken as our healthcare system, but people don't talk about it. But as somebody who's got a daughter in college and student debt from 30 years ago, I get it. So it is definitely badly broken and getting worse. Um, but the next question I've got is what percentage of young people vote now?
That is a good question. We haven't seen our most recent data from the primaries, so I'd be happy to share that with you all when we get those numbers in. We before we had a kind of like a team meeting yesterday morning before the primaries, and we showed that 80% of our base had voted in the election. So 80% of the folks who we have had contact with who are in between that 18 to 34 range have voted. And I'll be really interested. I was trying to look them up right before I hopped on, but I couldn't find the rates of how many young people voted in the primaries this year.
It's a
But I,
little short. It
yeah,
just happened.
yeah. And I think that that also, like, we know, like, young people have a harder time getting to the polls. They have a harder time getting their ballots in the mail because they're constantly changing addresses. Um, we know that, like, young people are often working and busy or in school, have limited time, like, need convenient polling locations. And so I think all of these things are also, like, barriers like to accessibility that we have to address while also engaging young people and asking them to engage in this process and in voting. And so I think there's like also some systemic things that we need to address as a state and as a country in order to bring those rates up a little bit.
Great. I love it. Somebody said, seems New Era affected yesterday's election. Wonder by how much. It's similar to the question you just answered. For those of you who are not in Colorado, we had our primaries yesterday, and it may not be getting national news. It should be. We had our Attorney General, who is term limited out, running against our senior senator whose term is not up yet, who is very much an establishment versus an insurgent. And our attorney general won that race, and he was outspent, and people didn't expect that. In addition to that, we had a 30-year incumbent U.S. House representative get beaten in the private by somebody, if I'm correct, it was 27, also as an insurgent. So I'm going to broaden this a little bit. And can you say kind of what impact New Era had and young people had on this election?
Yeah, 100%. I think that this was such an exciting primary. And like you said, we also had record numbers of voter turnout. We had the highest voter turnout since at least 2018. So that includes our 2024 presidential election in Colorado. And I think that like part of that speaks to the fact that when we have exciting progressive candidates on the ballot, people will turn out and people will engage in the system. I think that another thing that like stops young people from voting is that they feel like there's not candidates who represent their interests in a like direct and like hard way. I think that like a lot of I think that we saw that with like Malat Kiros against Diana DeGette, which is the like has been in office longer than literally I have been alive. And that was our talking point for young people when we were calling and deep canvassing and lit dropping for our candidates and talking to folks and young people at festivals about who is going to have their best interests in mind. And so I hope that we had a huge impact on this election. I think that like um, a lot of people look to us for who we're endorsing as our youth champions because those tend to be the most progressive candidates on the ballot. We go through a super rigorous process. And this, once again, is our Young People for All People, our entity that does political endorsements. But we have a very rigorous process that candidates go through they have to show alignment and evidence that they're aligned with the youth agenda around housing, around economic justice, around reproductive justice and democracy and like a ton of other things like immigrant rights. And so I think that like that's the other thing is like we were talking to young voters out in the field for the past month. And it is like the first time that I have seen young people be excited to fill out their ballot and to choose candidates who are actually going to represent their interests. And unfortunately, Julie did not win, but the margins were a lot slimmer than a lot of people expected. And so I think that it shows that young people and working class people across our state are ready to start showing up and electing progressive leaders into office over moderate Democrats who are career politicians who don't have young people or working class people in mind. And so Yeah. I mean, and and we do work to prep for the primaries and general elections like months and months and months in advance. So since I have started and even before I started in February, we have been doing deep canvassing twice a week, every single week with young people across our regions to talk about how much their vote counts, who they should be thinking about in the primary elections and November elections. And then we touch base with all of those folks on election day. We have a huge phone bank and we talk to every single one of them who answers the phone about whether or not they have a plan to drop off their ballot. We share where their closest ballot drop box is. We give them public transportation options. We try to troubleshoot with them if they have any kind of like issues or delays getting their ballot to a drop box. And I think that's also the other thing that is important for young people is like touching base again. I feel like far too often young people are used as like the like undecided voter, the low propensity voter that we're going to go out and canvass really heavy for 1 month and then we're never going to talk to them again. And something that I love about New Era as an organization is that we create relationship with those folks. Like we get in contact with them either through deep canvassing or them filling out a comment card, and we take them out to coffee and we talk about what they're passionate about and what like they're excited about and whether or not they want to get connected or just hear more about what's going on. And like we try and facilitate and cultivate those relationships with young people in our base. And I think that that helps, it helps like mitigate that mistrust in the political system. Because if you feel safe calling New Era your political home and you like trust us in who we're endorsing and like the information that we're giving you about what is most effective in participating in your communities, like that helps, I don't know. Yeah, that helps tear down that mistrust that we've been talking about that a lot of young people hold.
Thank you. That was a good answer. I am not from Colorado, and so in a state where everybody gets mailed a ballot, I find the turnout disappointing. But if it's better than it's been, I'll take the progress for what it is.
Yes, yes.
Demetrius, thank you for being patient. Go ahead and ask your
Thank you.
question.
I've had a lot of problems, especially with the virtual callers. Like I have to, I'm not, uh, I cannot canvas in person. So when I speak, they say, "What are your important issues?" This. I get like blank, like we don't care. So, um. Yeah, that's my experience. It's like this is like I don't know, I guess the youngest person I was speaking with, 38, was uh like uh was telling me his personal beliefs and this is how I'm going to do it and I don't like your candidates because of my belief system. So this is like the battle that I have to, the wall that they put on me a lot. Yeah. So it's not progressive enough. I mean, centrist, maybe if they're Democrat or Republican. Some independents don't even want to tell me what they're going to vote for. Yeah. So that's the issue that I have.
Yeah, so you're saying like young people not maybe knowing or like being tapped into like the issues that they care most about?
Yes, and I am a little older, so how would I know how would I be able to connect with them? And even with the people in my group, in my age group per se, they're like, they're already moderate or too conservative for like my candidates. So it's like, I'll leave them alone. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's also sometimes it is hard. I think sometimes that like it is hard to tap into like what young people's passions are, especially when they feel like they have not had a seat at the table to explore those passions before. And sometimes I'll ask like young people like, what do you care about? And they're like, I don't know, like some of the stuff that you care about, right? But like, I think that like one of the things that I love to do and ask young people is like, what is it like to be a young person in your community?
Mhm.
like less about like, yeah, maybe if they're having a hard time talking about what issues they care about or which candidates they would want to support, like let's talk about your experience. Like, what is it like to be a young person here? Do you feel like you have community? Do you feel like you have third spaces? Do you feel like when you go out and play basketball with your friends, you're safe? Do you like what are the things that are pressing down on you? And what are the things that you hear from your friends about what it's like to be a young person? Like, what do you guys talk about that excites you to live in this community? What do you guys talk about that doesn't excite you to live in this community? What parts of school do you like? Like, I think that there's a lot of like people will give you clues about what they care about, especially young people, when you ask about what their experience has been.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank
I've got
you.
a little something to add to this because I don't think that's necessarily just a young person response. I think there are a lot of older people that are having trouble identifying their issues. I've said many times before, issues don't matter anymore. It's a little facetious, but not completely, because so many people have wrapped their identity up in the group that they belong to, whether it's the Republicans, the Democrats, the socialists, the communists, whoever. People now think of them as that group member first, and if you are aligned with that group member, they will be aligned with you. But if you start talking about a specific issue that may not be relevant to them, they don't even have a stand that they take on it because it's about group membership and identity more than it is about these particular issues. And I think that's what Donald Trump really tapped into to get people to vote for him because his issues were not anything Republican. I mean, like he had no connection to it at all, but he was able to connect into people's identities and some of their fears to get them connected to that. So once you understand that he may not be looking for what's the right issue that's going to get this person engaged, but find out what they want and need from the groups that they are engaged with.
Hey, in case I forget to ask you later, we got invited to table at the Free Flowbots concert on the 4th of July at Levitt Pavilion. So if you have someone that wants to share table space with us, that would be awesome.
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely put out the ask to my volunteers and see if anybody wants to
Cool.
join.
Tiffany beat me to the punch. I'm going to take it a step further and say we would like to engage young people, get them involved, decision-making positions. I mean, like we want them at the table being part of what we do. And I know you know a little bit about us, but basically what we do is we say the things that people aren't saying, and we teach people to do the things that people aren't doing. So if people are interested in doing that kind of work, we are happy to have them and would like to extend an invitation.
Yeah,
We would
absolutely.
love to have somebody younger on our leadership team.
Yes, yeah, I would, yeah, I think that that would be an awesome collaboration.
Somebody asked, "What's your email? How can people get in contact with you?"
Yes, I will go ahead and put it in the chat. And I'll also put our website. So if you all want to learn more about New Era, um, you can see that there. But yeah, if you want to get in contact with me, for any reason, feel free, send me an email. Happy to chat, happy to collaborate on things. Um,
Could you just say the email, I mean the website, please, verbally?
yes, it is just neweracolorado.org for our website. And then my email is just Georgia, Jorja, at neweracolorado.org.
All right. The next question is, why are so many young people food and housing insecure?
I think that's a great question. I think that I so okay, so I was the director of basic needs for a couple of years at CSU, worked on a lot of food and housing initiatives on our university. And then also started as a member of the Affordable Housing Board for the city of Fort Collins. And I think that there's so many reasons. First, if we're talking about college students, I think like the root cause of our basic needs crisis in higher education is that students are spending like tens of thousands of dollars on tuition. And so what is the first to go? Food and housing. And I think that like when we have students choosing between whether or not they want a degree to further their vocational journey, their professional development, and gain a college education, and like choose between whether or not they're going to have stable housing and food. We're not setting anybody up for success. But I think this is also a long line that like has happened for young people like in our country for a lot of our history. Like I will talk to older folks about like food insecurity for young folks, and they'll be like, well, yeah, I remember when I was in college and I ate ramen every single day. And like, I don't think that we called it food insecurity at that point, but that's what it is. It's not a rite of passage. It is a real like barrier to accessibility that we can solve. I think the other thing is that like housing is the most unaffordable that it's ever been. So we know that that is just really hard for young folks who are not making as much money, who have lower paying jobs, who are starting at that kind of entry level pay. And for folks who are like actively paying for school in college, or even like high school graduates, like it is almost impossible to find rent under $1,000 right now in Colorado. Like when I was in DC, I paid less for rent than I did in Fort Collins, and I was 5 minutes away from the DC like from our US Capitol. And so and then we're also seeing like um corporations and like student housing across universities are like exploiting rent prices because they know that students need to be close to their school that they attend. And I think that's also why we're seeing like a rise in popularity of commuter schools, like we see at the Aurora campus and CU Denver, CCA, a lot of community colleges. But I think it speaks to like a larger experience that people in general are having. We're in an affordable housing crisis. Colorado is also in one of the worst affordable housing crises in the nation. And that's obviously going to affect our most marginalized groups, which includes young people and working class people. And so I think and like when we're thinking about how young people engage and participate in the political process, like I cannot emphasize enough how much we need to be thinking about this. Like people are not going to want to engage and do like go outside and like go do a protest for 4 hours when they have to think about what they're eating tonight, where they're going to stay, and like how they're getting their next meal, and whether or not they're going to get the textbook that they need or they're going to eat dinner. And so like we have to also like I loved the presentation emphasized this idea of mutual aid. If we want young people to be included in our movement, we have to allow them the resources to participate. And that means like having food when we have our events. That means making sure that like dinner is already provided so you can come and engage with us and you don't have to worry about what you're eating tonight. Making sure that like, yeah, we're connecting young people to paid opportunities so that they have income for the work that they're participating in. And like we have to make sure that we are taking care of young people's basic needs so that they can engage with us and be part of our civic process.
You know, when I was in college, one of my roommates had a Sam's Club membership, and we ate ramen and macaroni and cheese for most of an entire year because that's what we could afford. But there is a fundamental structural issue, and whether you're in college or not, food and rent are becoming unaffordable, particularly for people who are lower and lower middle class. If your family doesn't have enough money to send you to college where you can live in the dorms, you're going to need to get your own apartment. You're going to need to buy your own food, all of that is on top of the tuition you're already paying for school. And the jobs that young people can get during the summer just simply don't pay for it anymore. And they wind up running out of money for rent and running out of money for food on a rate that was much higher than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because of the inflation being disproportionate when it comes to going to university than it is in the rest of the world. You go beyond that, and if you don't have the money to pay for all of that university up front and you try and stay in the dorms, it is several times more expensive than getting your own apartment. But you don't see that because you don't necessarily need to pay the rent every month. But you're taking out student loans to cover that, and you get out of undergraduate school with $100,000 in debt. My daughter spent a year at Loyola, and that was $55,000 for 1 year. And any student that is going to be responsible for paying that is going to have a tough time making ends meet. And then you wind up, especially when you get to graduate school, where you don't have as much reliance on your parents, you don't have as much financial aid, you don't have as many scholarships. It's very, very easy for those students to wind up running into food and housing insecurity. I just heard a statistic that the uh, median starter home price is $400,000. I don't know in what world you can start out and buy a house that's $400,000. It just doesn't work out. Whether you're in college or not, if you're just starting out, it's not unreasonable to say it's going to be 20 years before I get to a point that I can afford that. And that's just the mortgage payment, much less coming up with $80,000 for a down payment. So that's where all of this food and housing insecurity comes from for young people. It's just it's structural, and that's what I think part of is what's upsetting to it.
Mm-hmm. And
Go
it's
ahead, Jeffrey.
I was just going to say quickly, and it's like no surprise that that is young people's number one priority when it comes to policy. And that's literally our top youth agenda issue is housing. So I just wanted to make that note.
Sure. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Do you think there's any groups like yours in Fresno, California, or anywhere else in the United States?
Yes, there is. I'm not sure about Fresno, California, but I'll send the link to the Alliance. We are part of a coalition of youth power movements across the US, and it is called the Alliance. So they have a list of all of our partner organizations across the nation that are doing similar work to New Era. And I will find that website and put it in the chat. So if you're living somewhere other than Colorado, you can take a look and see if there's any near you.
This may not be your area of expertise, but we had a question. I would like to know what we need statistically to overcome gerrymandering in a region. It might be a young people action.
Yeah, I I think that's a great question, and I really do not know the answer. I know that there's a couple of petitions that are out. There's both like a Democratic one and a Republican one, that are out right now, and those like numbers wise need 125,000 signatures to get on the ballot for the November election. And so that is kind of like what I know around petitions and like ballot initiatives in terms of like policy and legislators. I'm not sure, but I do know that redlining and gerrymandering is definitely an issue that young people care about, and like once again hits at that like systemic level thinking that a lot of young people have around like what issues we care about and why we are where we are today.
My idea is to end gerrymandering and all that kind of dark money and all that kind of stuff is something called democracide, otherwise known as crimes against democracy. You try and destroy, sabotage, or anything bad with a democracy, country's democracy, you face you face international law.
So that would require passing it as a law and making it a crime to do those kinds of things.
Like a
So
like
that's a
like
possibility.
a Fifth Amend whatever they call them in the Rome Stature.
Yeah. Um, so I
What do you
see
think?
there's a
What
little
do you
bit of a chicken and egg problem. To get rid of gerrymandering, you have to vote people out of office. But if they're gerrymandered, you can't vote them out of office unless you're getting overwhelming support against them. Um, and this is common all over the place. Um, Typically, the best ways to do that are one, get federal legislation that would end gerrymandering. Two would be, if somebody's got a 70% district, still get them voted out would be one way to do it. And then, like you were talking about, is a citizen's petition. And there are places where you can do it. They have done it. But at the same time, Republicans in particular are trying to make it harder to get these things on ballots that would then end gerrymandering and change redistricting in such a way that the districts would be more fair. But the reality is in the world we're in now, that they're making it worse. I mean, they're just what's going on in the Republican states, the end of the civil uh, or the Voting Rights Act, all of those things are going to make gerrymandering worse and not better. And it's going to take a large systemic shift to really end it. Like, it's not going to happen anytime soon.
I think there were some questions from the very beginning that got missed. These are when I asked, what question do you have for Gen Z? So maybe you can answer these on behalf of yourself, Georgia. Someone said, how do you want other generations to address you that you don't experience much today?
That is a good question. Like what identifiers do we like as Gen Z like to be
Maybe
addressed
like, how
by?
do you want people to
Oh,
connect with
okay.
you?
That's what I was thinking, but I wanted to make sure. I feel like I kind of talked about this in the beginning of what I chatted about, but I think that the most transformational experiences that I have had as a young person working with anybody who's older than me have been when people take me seriously. I think that I'm here today in the positions that I have been in, interning in the US Senate, having this amazing experience in college, getting a full ride scholarship. I did those things because people told me that I could do it. And I don't think that I would have known that I could do those things unless people were taking me seriously and telling me that like you are a serious person, like you can do these things. And so I think that like people should address young people with like an automatic assumption that they know what they're talking about. And if they don't know what they're talking about statistically or evidence-wise, they know what they're talking about based off lived experience. And sometimes like that is the most important thing and often the thing that gets overlooked the most. So I think like talking to young people like they are experts in their own lives, instead of people who haven't had enough experience to know what they're talking about yet. Um, and I think that that has been what has been most transformational for me as a young person as well.
Awesome. Another person said it feels like Gen Z is more in touch with the intangible of the universe and are more guided by their intuition and heart. Is this an accurate perception?
Yeah, you know what? I would say so. I think that a lot of us are um thinking about like ideology and values. I think that a lot of us are guided by big values like justice and kindness and love, and not like love in a cheesy way, but like love in the way that like bell hooks writes about it, that like love is a labor. Love is something that we have to practice and work for each and every day. And like it is something that happens in community. And I think so many more young people are realizing that like community is the answer to our problems. And maybe not the end all be all, but it is like the start of transformation. And so I think that I do think that young people are a little bit more in touch with their hearts, the heart piece of it. And I think that that is also why we are able to like imagine transformational systems for our future and like new visions, because we haven't been tamped down yet by a lot of like the evidence that we've seen around us of like things not working, or things, yeah, like things being too complicated, as we have heard from so many leaders. And then we see young leaders who come in and it's actually not as complicated as it seems.
Very cool. Morgan, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Um, I think that was really good. I think that she covered everything that I would have on it. So
Yeah, this was a great meeting. Well, thank you so much for being here, Georgia.